How's that going?
It's great. Well, we're live streaming, so I'll talk about it later.
When's the anticipated publication date?
September of 2023, in conjunction with the 40th anniversary of the founding of the company. But I just texted Michelle to see if she's coming. Let me text Natasha as well. Make sure we have a quorum.
Just so everyone knows, we're now live on YouTube.
So we have 3 out of 5 members. So that is.
Oh, here's Natasha.
There's Natasha.
So we have a
Do we
quorum.
know if
Good.
do we know if Michelle is coming?
I just sent her a text. And I'm promoting a couple folks to panelists. I can figure out how to do it.
Yep. Oh, I can do it if you need.
Thanks.
There. Promote, Madge, promote, and Seema. Okay. They are all in.
Excellent. Hey, Seema, nice to see you. Ken, nice to see your picture. And Madge, nice to see you. So it's 10:02. Let's get started. We have a quorum. This is the Bylaws Task Force monthly meeting, or mostly monthly. Wanted to welcome everybody. We were going to start today with page 15, section 4, section B, which is elections. But I thought instead, since we got a fantastic email from Beverly Donahue, who unfortunately couldn't make it this morning, I thought we'd start with that. She sent some input. So I took it from the email format and I put it into a Word document. And I'd like to share my screen, which everyone should be impressed as I do that. Hold on.
It should be enabled.
God, I just gotta find it. Share screen. Okay, so this is from Beverly yesterday afternoon, and I sent it out to the members of the task force this morning. And I'd like to start by just reviewing this. And Natasha, I know I pick on you all the time, but I love when you read out loud. Can you read this out loud for us?
Did you say you wanted me to read this out loud?
That's Natasha, but I think she's looking to unmute.
Ah,
Yeah, sorry.
But just to be clear, this is I sent out an email asking the entire board to send in input so that we could take a look at it and carefully review everything that people had to suggest. It seemed like a better way to go about it than having it in a meeting, which sometimes can be like a little bit of a beer brawl. So this is the first thing we've gotten in, and as we get input from other members in response to Manhattan Borough President's template, I'll share it with the task force, and then we'll review it at meeting by meeting as we go. So if you could read this aloud, why don't you stop after the first one and we'll discuss it. And so,
Susan, is it possible, instead of reading the whole thing, to just kind of give a quick summary of each of her points?
I didn't see this morning, so I don't know what it says.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it'd be better to read it aloud. Thanks, Jay.
Okay.
Okay. Number 1, the second roll call. She said, hi, Max and Susan. I would like to comment on several items in the model bylaws template. Number 1, the second roll call as a precondition for being marked present. The number of members who show up initially and leave well before the end of the meeting is huge. I assume that this was less of a problem before virtual meetings. Many leave before all resolutions have been voted. As an exercise, look at the total of the number of votes for the first resolution versus the last resolution at any full board meeting. I would support this change as it would reaffirm the expectation that members are there to hear from the public. It might also underscore the need for member comments to be brief and succinct to keep meetings short. Currently, the secretaries take attendance based on those who are present on Zoom, using Zoom records. We would revert to a physical sign-in sheet if and when the in-person requirements are reinstated. A second roll call would not have to be verbal or take up much time. I believe that the Borough President's Office takes attendance into account in the decision to reappoint board members. So this change could be consequential.
Great, thanks so much. I took a look at the other Manhattan community boards to see how they handle this. And so there are 3, let's say 4 that do 2 roll calls. That's boards 1, 6, and 10. And then Max, correct me if I'm wrong here, but board 8 takes a roll call before the end of the meeting, so I would count them as well. So that would say 4 boards currently have 2 roll calls, and then 5 boards have requirement that you attend substantially all of the meeting, but they don't have a mechanism for determining whether that happens. And that's boards 2, 4, 9, 11, and 12. And then 2 other boards, 3 and 5, have first and last votes. You have to be there for the first and last vote. And what's interesting to note here is that if the way we have it now with the community session at the end, as Beverly's highlighting, if you simply stay for the first and last votes, then you're not necessarily there for the community session, which is not, which is, I think, a problem, because it's the community board and we're there for the community. At any rate, I see Barbara's got her hand raised. Thank you. And once again, if I could just ask everyone to raise your hands. Can I stop sharing the screen right now? Sure. Okay. So Barbara, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on one of Beverly's comments, and that is that prior to having online meetings, full board meetings that were in person, we also got the same reliable number of people who walked out of the meeting before it was actually over, routinely. That's all.
Yeah. Thank you. Jay?
Yeah, I mean, on the assumption that at some point we're going to get back to in-person meetings, even my guess is that even if we go to some sort of hybrid meetings, we will still require that members be present, at least in order to vote, or some variation of that. And we generally use a sign-in sheet. We could also require mechanically that members sign out. And since we have a member of the office always present, they could verify the time. And then as far as evaluating people's attendance and how long they stay, we'd have a record of it. It wouldn't impose any time additions to the meeting. And, you know, if somebody signs out an hour before the end of the meeting, it'll be on record. And then the chair, and Bev is absolutely right, that attendance is a major consideration in appointments and reappointments, I should say. And you'd have a record of it without going through a proceeding. So I just wanted to, if you keep that in mind as a mechanical way to deal with the problem, but I think we should deal with it.
But so you're in favor of 2 roll calls then, or not, or 2 signing in and out?
I'm in favor of some, whatever you want to call it, whether it's a roll call or sign in, sign out. I'm in favor of some procedure that memorializes attendance and the length of time somebody has remained at the meeting.
Great. Okay. Natasha?
Yeah, I just have 2 things to say. First of all, it's very, very, very difficult to keep the elected officials on task and on time. And like in my experience, like none of our board chairs have been able to do that out of politeness or just common courtesy. But there should be some mechanism, because some of them come and just go on and on. So there has to, it's not just about the 2 roll calls. It's also what happens in between those 2 roll calls. So there should be some mechanism to keep those guys on time as well. And the other thing was, our first, the first item every time in a full board meeting is the public safety session. It's something that I personally am most interested in throughout the meeting. So I always try to be there for that. But maybe some people don't think it's that important. So maybe the roll call could be taken after that, because it's not something that needs to be voted on. It's not, we're listening to the commanding officers from the 3 precincts, which is hugely important, but maybe for some people, it's more important to be there for the votes and, for the business at hand. So if you could, I don't know, consider that.
Do you think it's important to have people stay for the public session?
Yeah, I think that would, because, we're here for the community. So yes, for the public session, but maybe I don't know, maybe if they don't want to start at 6:30, they can start at 7. Like
Okay.
it could be a soft start at 6:30 with the public session, with the public safety session starting on time at 6:30. But the roll call will not be done until 7. So it gives, people some, I don't know, it may be controversial or something, but it's just something I'm throwing out there.
Yeah, it might also be an issue in terms of quorum and confirming we have quorum before we start the meeting. Excuse me one second, Ken, can I ask you a favor if it's not too much? Could you put your actual video on? It's sort of uncomfortable to have only one person without video. And it is one of our best practices for Zoom. Thanks so much. Thank you. So yeah, it might be a problem in terms of quorum. So that's an interesting point we'll take into consideration. Seema, thanks.
So I guess my thoughts are building on what Jay and Natasha just said. I think it's important to understand where people are entering and when they're leaving. And this might add a whole lot of complexity. It's a lot easier to do on Zoom, certainly, where you can just go back to the transcript and sort of see that they entered at X time and left at Y time. I would personally love to see that, because I think it gives us a little bit more information about, what exactly people are paying attention to. The complexity, though, the further complexity arises in how do we define a substantial attendance at a meeting? Like, what does that mean, and how do we consider that? I'm also a co-secretary with Beverly, and thus far it's, we've been sort of forced to decide what does present mean. And pretty much it means if you, are on a meeting for an extended period of time. What that means exactly, we just sort of make a judgment call, and it's uncomfortable to do that. But in terms of both how we think about it as a self-governing board, and also how the Manhattan Borough President and the elected officials who appoint and reappoint, I think those are important considerations.
Yeah, very much. Thanks. Hey, Natasha, same thing for you with the picture, if you can. And can you lower your hand? Mark?
Sure is on.
Oh, okay, it was on for a second.
No,
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't raise my hand, or maybe my hand is raised. I'm actually dealing with an emergency at my son's school, so I may be in and out just for the next 5 minutes.
Sure,
Okay.
good luck, and I'm sorry. Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay. Madge, Mark, any input? Ken? Madge? Gotta unmute. Gotta unmute. You gotta unmute.
Okay.
Great.
Okay. My thought is that the public should come on earlier. They're the ones who are most easily discouraged and leave. And when someone is on the meeting and has something to say, and they have to wait 2 or 3 hours to say it, there aren't too many people who are going to stay for that. So I would like to see the public part earlier. Maybe let the elected officials wait, because they're always going to talk.
Great. So you would reverse the section, put it back the way it used to be, where it's the public session first and then the business session, and then maybe have the electeds at the very end?
Yes, or business first, public, and then electeds at the very end.
Okay, very good. Okay. And Mark, your hand is up?
Yeah, thanks. I wasn't sure that it was appropriate for me to speak, so since I'm not a member of your committee, so I'll try to keep it real quick. You're absolutely right. Any effort to reel in elected officials is dicey at best. They do take offense when we corral them, which is weird, because in their chambers, in the city council and in the Senate and assembly, they're on a timer. They know what that's about. But our efforts to put them on a timer have not been successful. I own my part of that. I agree with the concept. Zoom actually also provides, and Seema, maybe we could talk about this. Zoom actually gives you a report, not just of who was present at a meeting, but when you logged in and when you logged out. So there's objective data. You don't have to interpret what's going on there. The only wrinkle is that if Mark Diller shares his login with Madge and Max and Ken, then there'll be 3 Mark Dillers, and they may have attended the meeting for different lengths of time. The thought that I had to add to this is, so the logging in and, the signing in and signing out is one way to do it. Another thing you might consider is what they do for continuing legal education, which is that some point randomly during the hour or 2 hours that you're supposed to be paying attention to the finer points of bankruptcy law, is to have a little code that appears on the screen. And you don't know when it's going to be there. So you got to actually not only be logged in, but paying attention for the whole hour or 2 hours or whatever. You know, sometimes it could be in the middle of BCI and sometimes it could be in the middle of Gale Brewer. But if you don't have the second code, then technically speaking, you're not present. Just another way that some people skin that cat.
Right. Okay, very good. You know, the thing about the signing in and signing out, when we were still present in person, I used to notice that people, some people signed out well in advance of the meeting ending and then actually leave. So I think that certainly in person needed to be, in my opinion, needed to be tightened up. At the time, I don't think we had somebody from the office necessarily staying till the bitter end of the meeting. And so that would be a way that once we go back in person, we can tighten that up a bit. Jay, your hands up again?
Yeah, just quickly, to address all these concerns. And my focus has been, since the bylaws are on more or less permanent basis, my focus has been on when we return to in-person meetings. I would be in favor of language saying essentially that members' obligation is to attend meetings for substantially all of the meeting, and that language combined with a sign in and sign out with a recorded time, I think takes care pretty much of declaring what the obligation is and recording compliance with it. And then, and Mark, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because you've chaired the board a couple of times. My understanding is that the chair of the board communicates with the borough president prior to reappointments and, goes over any issues with any members up for reappointment. And the chair would have all those attendance figures available for evaluation.
It's the district manager, but yeah.
Okay, whoever, but clearly that's a very essential part of the evaluation
Okay.
for reappointments. And I think between the declaration of policy and an accurate recording of time in and time out, I think we would pretty much cover the issue of attendance. As far as the Zoom meetings, well, people put their picture on. As far as I believe me, Mark, you and I both went through that CLE thing with the code, and I'll confess, since I'm retired, that it was relatively predictable.
Okay, Jay. Okay.
And
So-
managed to put the recordings on and do some drafting and stuff. And anyway,
All right.
I mean that's a temporary thing. And if somebody has an issue with one of their children and they're gone for 5 minutes when the code comes up or something like that. So interesting idea, and we've suffered through it, but
All right. So
I'm
just
not sure it would work.
Okay, so just to wrap up, as I noted, excuse me a second, all of the other boards have some language in their current bylaws that say that they value, I'm paraphrasing here, but they have some mechanism for requiring you to be there for the full meeting, whether it's worded as substantially all, or you have to be there for the first and last votes, or it's 2 roll calls, but every other board has something. So it sounds like it's an agreement that we should have some sort of mechanism. How we work that out, we can determine. Let me go back to sharing my screen and welcome Rich Robbins to the meeting. Rich, if you'd like to turn your picture on, we're asking everyone to keep your picture on. It's best Zoom practice. It's a little odd just to see a staggered.
Yeah, I will in a bit. I just got out of a few meetings, and I will.
Okay. It is considered best Zoom practice to do that. And if I could ask Barbara to read the second one.
The creation of an elected treasurer position. There has been an unnecessary murkiness for board members as well as the public in handling, excuse me, in the handling of the board's budget. I have stepped up I have stepped in at least 3 times in the last year to analyze the budget status and recommend steps to avoid missed deadlines and barriers to necessary purchases due to unaligned budget codes. Quarterly budget reports to the board, prepared with staff, and an annual report to the city would address this accountability vacuum. A treasurer would also help us develop a more credible request for additional funding as part of the city's budget request process.
Great, thanks. I'm going to stop sharing. And I want to mention that Beverly sent this yesterday. I sent it to the task force and I asked, encouraged her to come to the meeting today, but she couldn't. She had a medical appointment, but she appreciated the chance to at least know that we're talking about this. And if I could turn to Max first, even though Natasha's hand is up, and I say, Max, how does CB8 handle this? Or how did they when you were there?
There was no treasurer at CB8. But I think that I personally think that would be a good idea. But we didn't have a specific treasurer, much like CB7. We had a budget committee, or it was a task force. I think I believe it was a task force.
Okay. And how is the spending managed right now? If somebody spends money from the CB7 budget, what happens? What's the mechanism?
It's right. So right now I have to. All of the money is lumped into one general category. There's only really 2 spending categories, really. And I have to transfer out money from the primary category and then use an object code to delineate exactly which subcategory, if you will, it goes to. And that's pretty much the process, how to transfer the funds. And then the approval process is a little more hands-on with me, Jesse, and the representative from downtown all having to do our individual part for accountability reasons to finalize the transaction.
Okay, very good. So there was a hand up and it's gone away. Who was it? Was it Natasha?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just didn't lower it from earlier.
Oh, okay. All right. Any thoughts about this from task force members first and then from the rest of the board members? Anybody? Jay?
I would just, Mark, do you have any, having gone through this as a board chair, any thoughts on it?
I'll wait my turn, but yes.
Okay. All right. So great. So then, Mark, you want to go ahead? Thanks for waiting.
I think this is a brilliant idea. I several times in 2 different tranches of being chair of the board, I tried to get greater visibility to it. Part of it was that well, first of all, the chair of the board doesn't even have the login to see what Max sees in terms of how the money sits or where it goes or how it's spent. There are times in which, of course, the chair of the board is grateful for that. And I completely understand the concern about visibility to it, because what I think is implicit in what Max has just said, and certainly was my understanding at the time, is that it is, because it's all kind of lumped into one account, you're also seeing the salary and other personal financial information about the board members, the staff members. Yeah, it's all one lump. So you can't look at how much money we spend on paper without also figuring out what the district manager earns, and I think even like some of the medical stuff. So I understand, when I was chair, the reluctance of the staff to share that with me, even though I asked for it several times. But it wasn't something that was worth going to war over. So having the bylaws and the protocols establish that this is a norm takes away the suggestion that there's a personal something or other involved in asking the question. And therefore, I think that is, and the level of detail is something that can be worked out between the executive committee and the office staff. But creating the norm, and again, I want to be really careful about distinguishing between personnel services and other than personnel services, which I think are the 2 buckets that Max was talking about. I think it's everybody's business to figure out if we're paying too much for the photocopier. It's nobody's business what the district manager earns. Nobody but those who were involved in that hiring process. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Institutionalizing things takes the personal out of it, and I think that's a good thing. Thanks.
Okay, great. Ken?
Yeah, I can see that argument. I'm wondering, do any other boards have a treasurer at this point? And would this role simply be oversight? And if it is oversight, would, in a sense, would it kind of be make work? Because I think we can trust our staff to make the right decisions in 99% of the cases. So I'm wondering how much work would be involved.
Okay, good question. Rich?
Two things, and if I could share my screen for 10 seconds. The staff salary is public. I just searched on See Through New York and you can see Penny's salary. So having visibility, that's visible to everyone already. I think having oversight of the budget is a good thing. I also think we should have in the bylaws that the budget should be presented on a monthly basis in top level form to the board. Because I've never seen a budget of how CB7's money is spent. And I think it's something that we should be aware of.
Okay.
So I think that should be included as well.
And you would recommend monthly. I would think if you're going to do that, monthly seems excessive, but it's certainly something to consider. Seema?
I also think this is a great idea. I know that Beverly has stepped in several times and done, yeoman's work on sort of figuring out all of the details. I think this position is probably not a significant time investment. However, it is absolutely crucial during staff transitions. So this transition from, Penny to Michelle left the finances in a bit of a mess. And so I think having just the assurance that, bills are being paid, that stuff is being tracked is actually really important. I feel like a monthly report might be too much. Maybe it's quarterly, maybe it's, twice a year, something like that.
Yeah, great. And that's what she was.
I also wonder, would this person also be maybe chair or part of the budget committee and also layer in some of the district needs work that happens as well as something else to consider?
That's a great idea to really have like a central processing system for a CPU for the finances of the board. Excellent. Thanks, Seema. Max?
Thanks. I just want to voice my thought that I do think it's a good idea. I think a quarterly report would probably be more appropriate. And I think that specifically because not a lot of spending actually occurs on a monthly basis. We really, really don't. Even if our budget was a little more robust, we would not be spending all that much. So I think it would potentially waste a little time to do it monthly. So my recommendation would be quarterly, but I am in favor of it in general.
Great, wonderful. All right, let me share my screen and we'll go back to the third point. Oops. And I'll read this one aloud. The recommendations on executive sessions. The template calls for prior public notice of executive sessions, including the general topic and minutes, presumably without any protected subject matter. We don't do that now. Maybe we should. I would see an exception for a personnel committee after a public announcement that it's being formed for a protected purpose. Also, my understanding for many years in city government is that executive committee meetings that are called solely to deal with logistical matters on the running of the board and do not include any policy-making content do not need to be public meetings. The template does not carve out these kind of gatherings. I think it should if deemed legally defensible. Any task force committee members, comments, suggestions, reactions? Anybody at all?
Do you mind just leave? I'm sorry. Do you mind just leaving that on the screen?
Sure.
Thank you.
Sorry, doing that because it's easier. It's hard to toggle back and forth between calling on people and looking at the shared screen. It's one of the challenges of being the Zoom person. Jay?
Is there anything in our current bylaws, Susan, can you remind me about executive sessions?
Pulling that up, hold on one second.
I see there's something in the template, but.
It's going to take a minute here. to go through my stack of all of the bylaws for the whole city. Hold on.
Well, while you're doing that, as a practical matter, is there any reason why the public needs to be informed of executive sessions? Since by definition, executive sessions are not open to the public, or for that matter, other board members.
I mean, that's what I would think, but let me just check.
You know, I found it. It's a section 3, executive session.
Yeah, hold on, thanks.
And it does say attendance at an executive session of the full board shall be permitted to any member of the board and other persons the board determines necessary to resolve the matter before the board.
What page are you on?
My copy doesn't have page numbers.
I apologize. We've been working so extensively with the Manhattan Borough President's template. I'm a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments? Rich?
Yeah, we should make sure that whatever we do is in compliance with open meetings law, which has specific language about executive session, which I believe, and I can put on my screen.
You don't need to, Rich.
So I think you can't have a separate meeting that's not disclosed to the public. You can only have an open meeting where you go off and go into executive session, but we should make sure that we know what open meetings law requires and that we follow it, because there are specific rules about what you can and can't do in executive session.
Yeah, I agree with Rich and Susan. I'll volunteer to take another look at the open meetings law and make sure that whatever we end up proposing to the full board is in compliance with that. But Rich,
I also think
we need to comply with it.
I also think open meetings law should, in all cases, be the minimum, and that we should always try to be as transparent as possible in everything we do.
Thanks very much, Rich. So Jay, that'd be great. I know we've done a lot of work looking into the open meetings law and making sure we're in compliance with that. Avoiding the appearance of impropriety is always as important as just following the letter of the law. Thanks very much. Ken?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I think that the template is responding to something in the open meetings law, if I remember correctly, about notice for executive sessions, but I could be wrong. But we need to check.
Okay, we'll take a look into that. Let's move on. The role of the vice chairs. I thought this one was particularly interesting. Jay, you want to read this aloud?
Other than substituting for an absent chair, the template is silent on the roll. While they also provide advice to the chair, my observation has been that while they bring significant social capital and experience to the executive committee, they do not play a major role in the running of the board or helping the chair to manage the office staff. Do we want to make their responsibilities more explicit or leave that to the chair's discretion? I'm not sure, but note that the current arrangement has made the chair's position incredibly time-consuming and demanding. And
Okay.
Thank you for reaching out about it.
Read the last sentence. It's really nice.
Thank you for reaching out for input and for all the hard work by the Bylaws Task Force. Best, Beverly.
Thank you. Okay, I thought that was really great. And once again, I really appreciated her input, and particularly so quickly because we sent it out several days ago. At any rate, any comments from the task force about this? It's an interesting topic. Natasha?
Yeah, I'm in favor of formalizing some responsibilities of the vice chair, especially if it goes some ways in reducing the workload on the chair, him or herself. And we have a former chair here, so maybe he can, I'd like to hear what he thinks of that. Thanks.
Okay, great. Let's get to Jay and then we'll get to Mark. Wants to
Yeah, I second that. I'd like to hear what Mark has to say, because I believe that the chair has pretty unfettered discretion as to assigning various duties and responsibilities to the vice chair. So I'm less concerned with, Beverly's concern about the overwhelming commitment that a chair has, because a smart chair will delegate responsibly. So I'm not sure we have, I'd like to hear from Mark. I'm not sure we have to delineate other than the most basic responsibilities, which is, what to do in the absence of the chair under certain circumstances. But
Okay.
I
So without
defer to
further,
Mark on it.
so without further ado, Mark Diller, past chair. Come on down.
There are many past chairs on the board, so maybe we should reach out to others, because I blush before thinking that my experience is that of everyone. That said, my approach, virtually all of you know my approach, but just to try to put words around it, my approach is that the board functions best when people on the board take up issues in which they are personally interested or invested or have some relevant experience. And yes, we're incredibly blessed with Beverly among many, many others, because her experience hands-on with the nitty-gritty of budget type things is something that is rare in our board and my experience with other boards. So I've never thought it a wise practice to impose upon vice chairs a particular role. First of all, it's hard enough to get folks to run for some of our offices anyway. And secondly, the roles that we want advice or supervision on change with both the board membership and the crisis of the day. So I guess the thing that I would favor, rather than assigning a specific set of duties, I mean, at one point I flirted with the idea, and I rolled this out with my executive team at the time, which was that we divide up the meetings of the standing committees and have the meetings of the board, the meetings of the committees be the responsibility of individual vice chairs. Currently, one of the vice chairs attends almost every meeting of everything that there is. In fact, I'm surprised he's not here. But that's a time commitment that may limit the ability to get people to run for that office. So I still hew to my guiding principle, which is that ask people to be to commit their time to the things that they're either have expertise in or interest in. And I don't know that I would want to formalize that any further. That's the best I can do but I will give this some thought.
Okay. I'm gonna go back to Natasha and then Seema. Natasha?
Yeah, I would just recommend maybe, like what Mark said, if we could also poll the other former chairs and the current chair and even the vice chairs about what they think their role should be, or how they could be more productive. Not to say that they're not, but how else they could be spending their time on the board. Because to me right now, it's not clear exactly when they step into on certain issues. So I think maybe just a general poll of all the chairs, former chairs, and maybe the vice chairs would be interesting to see.
I can take care of that. I think that'd be something more appropriate for one of the task force members to take care of. I will say, and then we'll get to you in a second, Seema. I will say it's interesting how Stephen is operating, because it's very unusual. The first time I've seen a chair do this so visibly, I don't know, maybe I just didn't know what was going on before, but that the executive committee, they meet on topics and they discuss stuff. And so it's not, it's much more inclusive than, for example, when I first joined the board, I know that the vice chairs were given special projects or special areas of interest to focus on, but that they weren't really relied on. I think that different chairs have taken different approaches, but Stevens, I know, is very, very heavily reliant on the executive committee. Seema?
Yeah, since I guess the only thing I'd caution is I like the idea of some sort of job description. I wouldn't want to make it binding, as you know, these positions are not elected as a team. And so forcing people to work together in ways that might not work for them might be a challenge. So that's, but I am in favor of defining the role a little bit more.
Great. Thanks. Mark, your hand's still up or you've got more?
One other thought, which is in my second go around with the chair as chair, I was there was a very collegial executive team, and I was very, very fortunate. I didn't have that the first time I was chair. One of the things that might work is to formalize a regular schedule for the executive committee to meet. I tended to reach out to them when I needed advice on things that were, I didn't want to make my burdens their burdens, but I also wanted to incorporate their thoughts. And there's always this, one of the brilliant executive team that I work with was Julian, who was a high school student. So you had to be careful about what time of day and what day of the week you could reach out to him. So having a formal, regularly scheduled meeting for the executive team, whether it's a public meeting or a brainstorming kind of meeting, again, hewing to the open meetings law where necessary, maybe that would be a helpful thing, so that instead of it being ad hoc and always constantly trying to find a time, it was in the schedule baked in. That's my other thought. Thanks.
That's a great suggestion. Thanks. Jay?
Just quickly, following up on what Seema said and what Mark said, I mean, pretty much all the suggestions in terms of functioning, as far as I know, they're all within the discretion of the chair. So Susan, when you contact the former chairs, and I think that's a very good idea, I think it's important to let them know that they needn't be uncomfortable if their thought is that it shouldn't be memorialized in the bylaws, but that it should remain essentially within their discretion.
Great. Thanks so much. Rich?
Yeah, I think you want to have the right balance between the chair being able to do things and not getting bogged down, and it being a board of one versus a board of 3 or 5 or however many are in the executive committee versus a board of 50. And I think right now we have a very powerful chair. And what Mark said, we want to make sure that executive session does comply with open meetings law. And if you have too much being decided and discussed in executive session, you're excluding the rest of the board. And I think that's something that's a big concern. We also want to make sure that the board is involved and the public's involved in decisions that impact both the workings of the board and the public. And I think that hasn't always been the case.
Thanks very much. Okay, great. So let's go. So that concludes the review of Beverly's input, and hopefully we'll get more, and we'll do the same process reviewing it. I'm going to share my screen now and go back to the template while my husband mutes the phone that just rang. So we're starting here, section 4B, election of officers. Hold on a second. Can you close the door? David, can you close the door? Never mind, it was about our car warranty. We don't have a car. Okay, so we're starting here, section 4B, election of officers. I was expecting it to be Wendy from Credit Card Services. So, Natasha, I know I always pick on you. I love when you read aloud. Would you mind? You're still here?
Sure.
Thank you.
Number 4B, election of officers. Number 1, election committee, A. It's the A.
Okay, so what I've done here is, let me tell you, I've taken out stuff that didn't pertain to ours. So if you want to read all of it, including the red that's crossed out, then we'll come back and we can make sure we agree on the stuff being crossed out. That's what's going on here. I took an advanced look.
So do you want me to read
the whole
it?
thing. Read the whole thing. Yeah.
The election committee shall be elected at the September board meeting from among those nominated either prior to or at the September board meeting.
No, I'm sorry. Read everything that's there. The stuff that's all of it.
Stuff that's been added. Okay.
Actually, I'll do it since I know what I was thinking. I'm sorry. Election committee. The election committee shall be appointed by the board chairperson elected at the September board meeting from among those nominated either prior or at the September board meeting. All nominations from the floor must be confirmed at the meeting by the nominee, either orally or in writing. The 3 nominees who received the highest number of votes shall make up the election committee, provided each receives at least a majority. The election committee will be tasked with soliciting nominations for board officer positions and with conducting the election of the officers at the November meeting. The election committee may collect statements and biographies from candidates at the discretion of the board. No member of the election committee may run for a board officer position during their time on the election committee. So what I've done here is that our current process is that the election committee is appointed by the board chair. And it didn't seem to me that we should start having an election for the election committee. It's just as like election upon election upon election. And also it's a question of the process in which it's done. And then let's see, okay, go on. So are there any questions from the task force? Rich, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I do. I think that we're better off not having the board chair who's running be the person appointing election committee members. It sounds kind of Trumpian to me. You
Okay.
want the board to be able to pick the election committee separate, especially if it's a contested election.
We've always had it done this way. I'm not sure I see a reason for not doing it that way, but thank you very much. Barbara?
You're muted, Barbara. Barbara, you're muted.
I'm so sorry. I apologize. I don't believe that we've ever really done it that way. I think that, for instance, Josh, who has been the person in charge of the election committee for many years, now has appointed the members who were going to be on his committee, and we've never voted on it.
Right, exactly. Thank you. Natasha?
Yeah, I like the simplification of this this section. I agree with it, actually. That's all.
Great, thanks. Also, it's, we're not trying to make a lot of changes here. So, to keep something that's been the way CB7 has done it seemed like a good thing to do. Ken?
Yeah, I agree with Rich that it's could be a problem. A number of years ago, we had a extremely close election that came down to a dispute between 2 members of the election committee. And who was appointed was extremely important, and one of the people, the board chair had appointed those people. So I think there might be a middle ground between having an
Ken, I'm sorry.
election.
Excuse me. I'm going to have to interrupt you. I think that's unacceptable. That it's sort of impugning the credibility of our fellow board members, and that's a violation of the bylaws. We really need to have courtesy and respect. And I think that you're suggesting that there was some impropriety. I'm just not comfortable with that. I'm so
No,
sorry.
I'm
You have
not
anything else to
saying there
say?
was. I'm saying there's
You're suggesting there was.
I know, I'm suggesting the possibility that there could
Okay,
be.
well, I'm not going to allow that in this meeting. I'm just not going to.
Well, I don't know what happened to free speech in meetings, but
It's free speech, but one of the bylaws talks about courtesy and respect, and impugning the reputation or the
I'm
suggesting.
not
impropriety is not-
impugning any specific person and I'm not saying it happened. I'm saying there is the possibility that it could happen. And I think there's a middle ground between having an election for an election committee and having the board chair appoint the chairperson of the election committee. I think maybe the executive committee could appoint them, perhaps.
Thank you very much for that. Currently, the way it works is that the board chair appoints the head of every committee, and then that chair gets to select who's on the committee. I don't see any reason why we would do that differently, but thank you for your input. Natasha?
Yeah, so I agree with the last point that you made, Susan, that the chair appoints the head of every committee. So that should be the way it's done over here as well. But on the day of the actual election, aren't there like outside representatives, like representatives from the Manhattan Borough President's office, like to supervise and oversee the election? It's not like there's some sort of conspiracy going on. Separate room with just like 5 people in there who are choosing. So, I mean, if that oversight were not there, then I would be concerned. But like you're saying, it's been, if the chair has the discretion to appoint the head of every committee, then this should not be very different. And we have the oversight outside CB7 personnel on the actual day of the election.
Great, I agree. And furthermore, the election results are public, which is a topic of some interest and some discussion, but the election results are public. So anyone's welcome to go to the borough district office and take a look at the results and see what happened. Thank you, Natasha. Jay, briefly?
I agree with you, Susan, and with Natasha, and just a note with a junk call. I'm sorry about that.
It's about your car warranty, I'm sure.
Just to point out again, with apparently a very rare exception, the function of the election committee is largely ministerial and mechanical, and I don't think there's any real reason to change the appointment process.
Thanks very much, Mark.
Thank you. The presence of outside monitors from the borough president's office is an unusual, not a usual practice, which leads me to question why it was that they attended certain elections and didn't attend others. I guess you'd have to ask that borough president's staff. I agree with Susan that the appointment of the board chair by the board chair of the chair of this committee should be like any other committee. So I agree with that part. What I did, and I think my predecessors did, but I was obviously almost by definition not involved, was that unlike every other committee where the individual members of every committee are appointed by the board chair as well, I left it to I appointed a chair of the election committee and asked him or her to appoint or gather members as they saw fit. And I thought that worked well. I don't see that here. So I might suggest, since the default is that the board chair appoints all members of a committee, in this one instance, I would think that it would make sense to highlight that distinction. I actually don't object to the idea of it being done on the advice and consent of the executive committee, if that gives folks some comfort. But I don't think that this should be an election. I absolutely don't think, I agree with that point wholeheartedly. Thanks.
Great. Thanks so much. Okay, we've got 7 minutes left on our timely meeting, so let's plow ahead. So Natasha, you want to read this part? It's not all marked up. Nominations for officers.
Nominations for officers. A, individuals interested in being a board officer shall announce their interest at the regular monthly board meeting 1 month prior to the scheduled election. Candidates' names will be recorded and ballots will be shared with all board members prior to scheduled elections. 2B, at meeting with scheduled election, nominations may be heard from the floor.
Okay, so there's what's it called, a grammatical problem there we'll fix, but otherwise, are we in agreement on this? Any comments?
What's the, I mean, we generally have a nominating process a month before the election. This seems kind of anachronistic, this individuals having to announce their interest. I mean, we have nominations. If somebody isn't interested, they decline. I mean, it seems, the nominating process is the real process. I'm not sure. I don't know. This seems archaic and unnecessary.
A little bit convoluted, perhaps.
Yeah. I think we could, just clean it up and, we have nominations and then we have an election.
So the way we do it right now, which is the nominations are 1 month before actually it's
Right.
2 months before, because then the next month you have, it's 1 month before, 2 months before that you announce it, have the nominations, and then let's say the elections are in November. So in September you have nominations, and then in October you read the statements, and then the following month you have the election, or you have the statements read and the election at the same time. Mark, why don't you unmute and just talk?
Yeah.
So the current bylaws require that we have at the meeting before nominations, you announce that there'll be nominations at the next meeting. The way that typically works is that in the July meeting, because we don't meet in August, in July, the chair of the election committee says, hey, next month, September, we will entertain nominations for the following board offices. Then in September, you open the floor to nominations position by position. There's then a month, and then at the October meeting, you vote, and then the slate that wins takes office in November. That's the current procedure. So if I could just double team here and say, I don't have any concern with 2A. 2B concerns me, because essentially in that rubric, that would mean that folks get nominated through the usual process in September, but then before you take a vote in October, you open the floor to nominations. And I don't think that that's efficient, because what typically happens if there's a contested election, or even if there's an uncontested election, is that the candidates do whatever process they think is appropriate to support their candidacy. And so for somebody to jump in at the end doesn't seem to me to be promoting an orderly process.
Yeah.
Now, I do know that there are some boards where what we do, which is in effect to lobby or campaign, is absolutely taboo. That the candidates never speak for themselves, and there isn't electioneering. Maybe that's where this board, where this provision comes from. But I wouldn't favor that, both for our history and for the orderly process. Thanks.
You would or would not be in favor of the electioneering?
I think that, well, having had the history of it, I don't think we're going to do away with it anytime soon.
Yeah.
And then you end up with you'll end up with a whole mess of executive sessions, going back to the early part of the meeting, about whether somebody did or didn't violate the bylaws by saying that I'm a great guy.
Frankly, I don't see why you wouldn't be allowed to electioneer. I mean, you can do that for any other office you run for. Why would you be prohibited from doing it here? That doesn't make any sense. I think it's a great opportunity. If you want to put the time and effort into it, you should be allowed to reach out to people and let them know what you think. Jay, real briefly, we got 3 minutes left.
Yeah, I just think A and B should disappear.
Okay.
Neither one of them is necessary or appropriate.
Okay, so I'll take a stab at this, and we'll pick up here next month. I will circulate a date that looks good. I'm taking a look at the calendar. Once again, apologies for I have to take a look and find out when the seniors task force meets to make sure we don't conflict with that. And then I see Ken, you've got your hand up real quick.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that this meeting will be posted on YouTube, so it's not in violation of the open meetings law.
Of course it is, Ken. Thank you very much for that.
Can I just jump in? It is currently streaming, actually. Ken, I'm also going to get back to your email, but probably not until later today, because I'm still working on those other things. But this one for now is actually streaming.
Great,
And,
thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
Okay, great. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Thank you, everybody, for your time and effort. I do think that we're, let's see, we've lost Madge, but thanks so much for coming, everyone, for your interest in the bylaws. I do think we're pretty close to the end here. We've got, I think we're on page 18 or 19 of 20, something like that, Manhattan Borough President's template. And as I said, I'll take a look and see when the seniors task force is meeting in March, unless Max, you know that off the top of your head, not to put you on the spot.
I don't have it in front of me right now, no.
It might be meeting on the 10th. So right now, I'm thinking,
Yes, that is what it is. Sorry, that's just it triggered. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I propose is that we meet on March 17th, which is St. Patrick's Day and Purim, as long as that's not a problem for anybody. And we'll circulate that and post it as always. Okay. Thanks so much, folks.
Can I jump in real quick with a thank you to Susan for the invitation this week? It was nice to receive.
Thank you so much, Mark. Barbara, you had something?
Are you going to discuss the minutes, adding minutes to the bylaws?
Yes, absolutely. And I want to apologize. There's been a lot of illness in my family and among my close loved ones, so I've been a little distracted the last month. But back on track right now with some cases. Very grateful for that. And but a little distracted today, and this week it's been a little tough. So thank you for your forbearing. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Susan.